It's Devon with MVP Sport Fishing and Reel Action Charters. Today I wanted to dive into the details on flasher and fly setups. Spoons are pretty plug and play. You're going to pick your size, your color, and your brand. You're going to send it out there, and that's pretty much all you have to worry about. When it comes to flasher flies, there's a ton of other variables. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I just want to lay out all of the variables and all the factors in a way that hopefully you can kind of put them all together in your head and figure out what works for you. Just because it works for me doesn't mean it works for you. I'm not here to try to get you to fish like me. That's not the idea. I want to just lay everything out there, and hopefully you'll understand a little bit better on all the details behind flasher flies. Because if there's something that, your average guy struggles with, it's going to be flasher flies compared to spoons. To start with, there's a bunch of different kinds. You have two-finned flashers, one-finned flasher, no fins, spin doctors. You have different sizes, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12 inches. So to start with here, we have your average 8-inch flasher. This one here has 2 fins on it. Here's a hot spot, 8-inch flasher, has no fins on it. Here's a flasher, has one fin on it, has all 8 inches. If we dive into spin doctors, there's a bunch of different kinds here. If I can get them straight, you have your baby 6-inch, your 8-inch in the middle, and then your 10-inch. You can see they all have the kind of double fin set up there on the bottom. You have 10-inch fish blades. There is 11-inch paddles. That one's got 2 fins. This one has no fins. There's just a bunch of different ones. This is a old 12-inch fish blade. So there's a lot of different options when it comes to flashers, but there's really no tweaks or anything you're going to do to them. They're kind of plug and play. You pull them out of the package, you decide what size is going to work for you with whatever you're trying to do that day, and you're going to hook up your fly. Your fly is really where all your variables are. So to start with, most people have 40 to 60 pound line on their flies. I kind of go right in the middle, 50 pound fluoro. I want that fluoro because of the stiffness to create that whip back and forth. The stiffer that line is, the more it's going to whip back and forth. So then once you have your line, you obviously have to figure out what kind of hook you want. You can go with a single treble, or the other one that is fairly popular is what they call a tournament tied rig. So I'm not going to show you a single treble because I think you're aware of what that is. We have a tournament tied rig, which is basically a single hook tied in front of the treble hook, kind of snelled in there. I use those for a long time. If a fish gets that single hook, they're not getting off. The problem with them is that if they get the treble hook in the corner of the mouth, that single hook between all their thrashing and sometime on the way in, catches them somewhere over here. And what that does is pulls the gill plate out, and they start coming in a circle, and it takes forever. And it just kind of got away from them for that reason. So I personally just have just the normal single treble hook. Tournament tied rigs are great. There is that one downfall to them though. The main thing with your hook is you want a really high quality hook. I used owner hooks for the longest time. Now I'm kind of transitioning a little bit to, I think they're called Adia or Adia no cutoff hooks. You want it like a 2x strong hook. You don't want it to bend. Once you get a shaft on it that bends, you might as well throw it away because it's going to keep bending. So I want that to be as good as I can for as long as I can, and I'm kind of going to get into that why in a little bit. But the longer that leader and that hook stay good, the greater that bait is going to be. So talking about trebles here, I'm going to try to show you this. It's something that I started doing a while ago. I started epoxying try to get this in focus. I started epoxying the crevice of my treble hooks because if there was one thing that I couldn't stand, it's when the hook came in backwards with the line kind of wrapped. I'm not gonna be able to show this very well, but the line wrapped in that crevice, and that basically allows the fish to pull that hook out backwards the same way you would take it out with the pliers. Comes right out. You lose the fish, you reel it in, and your hook's turned. If you fished out there at all, you understand what I'm talking about. And it was probably the most annoying thing to me because there's really not a whole lot you can do about it, except for fill that crevice. So I started doing that to most of my hooks. Let me find my other one that I got here. But these Adia hooks, I think they're called, no cutoffs. They basically come with a glob of resin in that crevice, and it keeps that from happening. Now, it doesn't last forever, but it does last plenty long enough, and really basically stops them turning the hook 100%. So I personally am a fan of that. So that's how I go about my hooks. But again, you want a nice quality treble hook and at least 2x strong. I mean, I've used 4x strong even, but some of those get real thick and it kind of takes away the gap of the hook, so you need a bigger hook. But then you have your beads. The main thing with beads is they're made to be a spacer. That is the main focus of the bead. You want your hook to be. You see the hook there. You want your hook to be at the very end of your fly. You don't want it way up at the top, and you don't want it. If I pull the fly up, you don't want it hanging out the bottom like that. So you want to get it just inside the back of your skirt, and that's the main purpose of the beads. Some people like to play with bead color. Other people like to have clear beads on everything, which I can understand both. What I think about beads is I think bead color can help you, but I also think if you do it wrong, bead color can hurt you. When I think of this whole thing, and this is a question that I get asked a lot on a charter or something like that, people ask, what is that? That doesn't look like anything a fish would eat. And people ask what the fish think it is. Well, I haven't been able to have a conversation with any of the fish yet, so I don't know what the fish think it is. There's a couple different theories. Some people think that the flasher is the salmon, and it's feeding, and then this is kind of a bait fish in the school or something like that that's behind the salmon while it's feeding, and when salmon are feeding, it kind of creates a feeding frenzy, so that's the thought about it. I think about it more like this is the school of bait fish kind of going around in a circle, and it just looks like the big school of bait fish because they're so tight, and this is the fly that can't keep up, or this is the bait fish that can't keep up, so that's why they're eating it. So when I put these together, I don't always, obviously, but a lot of times I like to match them. Green flasher, green fly, blue flasher, blue fly, vice versa. If I got a blue fly, I'm either putting clear beads in it or I'm putting blue beads in it. If I have a green fly, I'm either putting green beads in it or I'm putting clear beads in it. So I'm kind of matching my beads with my fly if I do have color with it. So like as an example, I have a Megatron, kind of a shiny blue with a shiny blue fly, and it's tough to tell, but those beads are light blue, the same color as everything. So I like to kind of match it all up. What I think can hurt you is some people just grab beads at random and they stick it in there, and you got green beads and blue beads and yellow beads and orange beads and red beads at no particular order, and they're just kind of all thrown around. I don't think that helps at all. But if you're going to use a colored bead, I would at least make it all the same color. It doesn't have to match, but at least make it the same color, I think helps. Flies, there's a zillion different kind of flies. Your main ones are blue or green, glow, UV, mirage. They have rubber legs, which they call frog, or some form of white. There's a zillion different flies. You just have to figure out if you want to own a zillion different flies and rifle through them, or which ones work best for you. But the biggest component of this is leader length. And it is the biggest component of it because that's what dictates speed. It's not like it's not like a spoon on your lead cord that is directly related to the speed of your boat. At least not if you do it in a certain way. So the biggest question with that is, well, do I want my leaders the same or do I want them different lengths? If you have them different lengths, what's going to happen is when you speed up and slow down your boat, they all speed up and slow down differently. So like most of the time what's going to happen is you're going to get one particular one that is really working, and it's probably because it's going the right speed. So as an example, if I had 5 flashers out there and they're 8-inch flashers, we'll just say, so we'll pick 22 inches, 24 inches, 26 inches, 28 inches, and 30 inches. Those are my, if I'm picking them differently, those are my different leader lengths. Well, let's say my 24-inch one is getting bit, but that's the only one. So then I try to speed up a little bit, and my 24-inch one quits getting bit, but now my 26-inch one is getting bit, and that's the only one getting bit. The problem there is that you're generally only going to get one of them that's getting bit. And that's excluding early morning and late evening. When they're biting like wildfire, you can throw anything in the water and it doesn't make as much of a difference. But if you want to be really good, you have to catch them when they're not committing suicide. So I think the best way to do it is to have them all the same length. Then if you speed up or slow down, in this instance, all 5 of them are speeding up and slowing down the same. They're always going the same speed. So maybe I'm not catching them, but then I find what speed they want. Now they all have the same opportunity to get that bite. So some guys measure that like by their arm. I've seen a lot of that on YouTube, where people just go like this, and it's a certain length, which is all fine and dandy because then it is the same length. The problem with that lies is if you don't know what that length actually is. So like, let's say I'm not catching them, so I call Joe, and Joe's like, hey, I'm really getting them on my flashers and flies, and I'm going 2.2 miles an hour. Well, first off, if I don't ask what his leader length is, it doesn't do me any good, because 2.2 miles an hour at a 24-inch leader is a lot different than 2.2 miles an hour with a 30-inch leader. So now I have to ask what his leader length is, and he tells me it's 26 inches. So he's going 2.2 with a 26-inch leader, but if I don't know my exact length, that doesn't do me any good. So no matter how you measure it, you still need to know at least pretty close how long that is. So for instance, Joe is getting them going 2.2. He's got a 26-inch leader. Well, let's say all mine are tied at 24. Well, if I'm going 2.2 and all mine are 24 inches, they're moving faster than his 26-inch ones, because the longer it is, the slower it's going to go. The shorter it is, the faster it's going to whip. So in this particular example that I just made up in my head, I probably have to go somewhere around 2 miles an hour with my 24-inch leaders to match his 2.2 and 26-inch leaders. Now, I'm sure it's not a direct line, like I just kind of made it there, linear between speed and length, but just kind of painting a picture. So for 8-inch flashers, I'd say the norm is somewhere between 22 and 30 inches. I'd say probably 98% of people fall somewhere in that range for a leader length behind an 8-inch flasher. You have to figure out, kind of how you fish and what works best for you. If you troll slow, maybe you want a shorter leader. If you troll fast, you probably want a longer leader. That being said, I've probably watched every salmon video I can find on YouTube. If you go look at Salmon Showdown in Manistee and pay attention to Kingfish, and if you know anything about Kingfish, he's a phenomenal fisherman. He's won a bunch of tournaments every year over there. They had a camera on his boat, and although maybe he didn't do great in that specific tournament with that, with the camera on his boat, if you pay attention, every fish that comes in the back of that boat is on the same setup, and I could be wrong, but to me that looks like an 8-inch spin doctor. It might be a 10, but I'm pretty sure it's an 8-inch spin doctor, and that thing is high 30s, if not 40 inches. So I'm throwing that out there just as a reference to say it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be 24 inches. It doesn't have to be 27. It doesn't have to be 30. Figure out what works for you, and that's what you want to go with. You don't want to start chasing everybody else. Spend some time, experiment, and maybe when you're experimenting, you have to have a bunch of different leader lengths, because otherwise, how do you really know? So to get started, maybe every time you go out, and the 27-inch leader length is what always does the best. So put them all at 27, something like that. But I just wanted to throw out that example, one that really sticks in my head as I was watching some of the Salmon Showdown stuff, paying attention to the details, and that caught my eye as something that I definitely don't do with an 8-inch. And like I said, they're super good fishermen, so obviously they have something figured out. Once you get all that far, the most important thing is the leader itself after it gets bit. No two baits are created equal, and I mean that as if I have a Megatron here in the water and it's getting bit, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a trip, it doesn't mean that I can just throw out open the package, open the same fly or tie up the same fly, whatever it may be, throw it out on the other side, or even take my hot Megatron off and put a brand new one down, that it's going to be the same, because it's not. I don't exactly know what to contribute it to per se in terms of the actual details of it. What I can say is what I'm going to get into at the end of this a little bit about salmon's smell, and how they smell. They actually can't see that well. Their focal point's only about 3 inches in front of their nose, and even at their highest focus at that 3 inches, they see about 10 to 14 times worse than we do in terms of being able to focus on stuff. So their image is blurry, but what they make up for in that blurriness is their sense of smell. When your fly, specifically, same thing with spoons out there, when it gets bit, it becomes substantially better. That is why, if you've caught a bunch of fish on a fly and it's all the way down to the beads and 80% of the mylar, tinsel, or whatever you want to call it is gone, it's not because you have some secret beads on there. It's because of the smell associated with that lure. Now, I've put them, I've rubbed them on fish out of the package and put them in mouths, and I don't know if it works quite as good, but there's something about them naturally biting it that is irrefutable in my mind, and I don't know exactly what chemicals they may leave behind, or maybe it's the stress, something they release on the way in when they're fighting them, but it's definitely something that salmon can smell, and it's definitely something that makes your bait better. So as soon as you get one that's really working, you want to try to keep it that way for as long as possible. That's why you want a quality hook that doesn't bend, because as soon as it starts to bend, it's going to bend every single time, and you really just want to keep it the best you can possible. Careful with your pliers, don't grab your line. I'm to the point where I believe in that so much that even if my line is super nicked where I think it's going to break, in terms of behind my flasher on my fly, I'm probably going to leave it until it breaks, because if I put a new one down there, it is not going to be anywhere as good. I will fish that thing until it's gone, and then I'll have to start over. Yes, you can put a brand new one out of the package and put it down when they're really, really biting, and of course it's going to get bit, and that's a great way to get more quote-unquote hot lures. But there's nothing that compares to one that's been eaten 10 times and it only substantially gets better. So I'll kind of just leave that at that. So let's jump into flasher size. So we have 10-inch flashers, either, like a fish blade or a Spin Doctor. I admittedly do not run a lot of normal flies behind either one of those. If I do, it's 33 inches, but the norm that I'll say is 30 to 45-ish, anywhere in that range. Obviously bigger flasher, bigger circle, and you want a longer leader to kind of encompass that, otherwise your fly's really, really wiggling. 11-inch paddles is something I don't run a lot of, but when I do, I'm going about 44 inches. It's something I've played with. There's People use 33-inch flashers because they are 33-inch leaders because they stay with the 3 times the length of the flasher, which is a solid solid reference point. But once you get bigger, you're generally fishing them deeper, and kind of those fish that are down in the cold water being lazy anyway, so they like it a little bit longer. But when it comes to 11-inch paddles, I mean, people use them anywhere from 33 inches to 6 feet. 6 feet's long. I mean, that's as tall as I am, and I've done it. I've seen it, and it works. The fly isn't moving back there. But that goes to show you that it's something else. There are other variables sometimes that maybe they just don't want to have to chase it. Maybe they don't want it that close to the flasher. Maybe they're just lazy. Again, you can catch anything. You can catch salmon on anything when they're biting. It's a matter of getting them when that sun's up and they're not actively feeding. That's where you separate yourself. And then talk about 12-inch. The only thing I've ever ran on a 12-inch is meat, which again obviously has a longer leader, anywhere from 4 feet to 6 feet. But the bigger the size, the deeper I use it, generally speaking. That's not saying that an 11-inch paddle can't catch them 25 feet down, and that's not saying that an 8-inch flasher can't catch them 150 feet down, because it absolutely can. But general rule of thumb, for me anyways, is smaller flashers are better deeper than larger flashers are shallow. So like a smaller or an 8-inch flasher down 120 feet is better than a 11-inch paddle down 30 per se. Again, not saying they can't catch fish in either place, because they absolutely can. But generally speaking, if I'm running a bigger flasher, I'm running it deeper. So a 10-inch, I'm at least probably 50 feet down. 11-inch, I'm somewhere in the 70 to 80 feet down at least, and lower from there. Admittedly, I'm a big 8-inch guy. I mean, 90% of the time it's 8-inch, 8-inch, 8-inch. Unless I'm running meat or vegan or something along those lines. Which leads me into the next topic, and this will be the most controversial thing you'll hear me say. Some people probably shut it off as soon as I quit talking. But it's just an opinion that I think, if you think about it from a science aspect, just makes a lot of sense to me. And from what I've seen running them side by side or against other people in tournaments or whatever it may be, I've put a lot of time and thought and effort into this, and this is just how I feel. So let me jump into it. Meat catches fish. I'm not saying that meat doesn't catch fish. And this argument that I'm going to make is not that meat doesn't catch fish. It's that meat isn't better than the other fake stuff that we use. So it's not better than, a flasher fly or a vegan rig or a spoon or anything else. I think people think that because it's meat and it's real, that it's better, and I truly don't think so. So let's think about other species for a second. What is probably the greatest walleye bait of all time? Probably a jig and a minnow, or some sort of live bait rig with a minnow, crawler harness, whatever. I don't think that's questioned. I think that that's pretty not debatable. Now, I'm not saying that that's what all the NWT guys are using all the time, and they're not, but there's specific reasons for that, and it's because live bait is a pain in the ass sometimes. It's hard to keep alive. If you're rip jigging a shiver minnow or something, you can't do that with a minnow, because you're just going to rip its lips off and it's going to fall off. If they're biting, and that's when you're trying to get them to bite out of aggression more than out of being hungry. If they're kind of nipping at it, you want to put a stinger hook on there. Well, that doesn't work very good with minnows sometimes, because you just can't get it to look as natural. The other big thing that stands out is you don't troll minnows. The walleye trolling industry has exploded and it's all over. But there's a reason why you don't troll minnows or troll live bait. So obviously there's crawler harnesses, and that's what everybody's going to jump on me about by saying you can't troll live bait. Well, a worm looks the same dead or alive, so that works well. You're just kind of pulling it with a spinner. It doesn't matter if it's dead or alive. It looks the same, smells the same, albeit. But there's a reason why you don't troll a minnow and you just can't get it to look the same. And when it dies, it probably doesn't smell the same. And the same concept for other species like crappie and panfish. You know, the best bait for crappie or panfish or anything like that is some form of live bait, whether it be a minnow, a worm, a grub, even musky fishing to some extent. You can make the argument pretty easily that, you know, a live sucker rig is the best musky bait. So let's relate this back to meat. If they bit meat because it was real and it looked and smelled real, it would outfish everything 90% of the time, because we're not doing all those other applications of it. We're not rip jigging, we're, you know, whatever, and we're not using it because of that. We're out there trolling at 2 to 3 miles an hour for 99% of the time. So we're doing the same thing. So if they bit it because it was real, they would bite it 90% of the time better than anything else you have in the water. And from what I've seen against everything else, that isn't the case. It has its days where it is the best setup on the boat. But those amount of days are 10% of the days at best. And for me, it's probably less than that. I'm not a great meat fisherman. I don't claim to be. But if it was real, like all the other species of fish, they would bite it the best 90% of the time. And that's just not the case when it comes to meat. And they bite it like 10% of the time in terms of the best rod on the boat. Now, it'll catch fish all the time. I'm talking about being the entire best setup on the boat. So it's just rarely the best setup. And to me, it's the lowest of any of the other setups. So the percentage of days where flasher flies are the best is way above meat. The percentage of days where vegan rigs are the best, way above meat. The percentage of days where spoons are the best, way above meat. So if you think about all the variables in meat, unless you're using alewives, it doesn't look real and it doesn't smell real to them. They have never seen a ballyhoo, they've never eaten a ballyhoo, they've never seen a herring, they've never eaten a herring. I don't care that they came from the ocean. They're, let's say, over 10 generations past that in terms of their life cycle. They have no idea what those are. So unless you're using alewives, it's not real to them anyways. Now, it don't matter what you use, you're brining it. You're putting it in salt, whether that's normal salt or borax or whatever it may be. So you're putting it in salt to firm it up. What that does is basically the salt infiltrates the fillet, or in whatever case you're using whole, which I applaud you because that's probably the best. At least then it looks like a fish on both sides. So you're putting it in the salt, and that salt absorbs into the meat to make it firm, which is what you have to do. Otherwise, you put it in the water and it's mush, falls apart, doesn't look like anything you can even catch fish on. What that salt does is it takes away the natural smell that's there. So the natural smell that you thought you had has been vacated by the salt. I mean, these are fish that are able to smell the chemical composition of the water down to the level to be able to distinguish between individual amino acids in the water and be able to map that out for the 4 years they're in the lake, as well as the exact creek or river they came from, and be able to sort that out and go right back to where they were either born and or planted 4 years later. Whether that's the ocean, whether that's Lake Michigan, that's fact. That's widely been written in scientific articles. There's no denying that. So if you think that they can't smell, that you've completely changed that and it smells nothing like what you think it's supposed to smell like, yeah, I don't know what to tell you. Because they can definitely smell now that salt. There's just way more variables in it than a normal flasher fly, and I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying that there's a lot more that goes into it. You have the roll of the meat, and everybody's trying to get a certain roll, and they put it in the water, and it's 8 inches below the surface, and they're trying to get the bloop, 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 bloop. Well, what good does it do to see that roll on the surface? If that were the case, then we wouldn't ever use we will never use our fish hawks to figure out current, because we all know the current is different, especially down where you're probably running meat down 70, 80, 90, 100 plus feet. So it doesn't matter what that spins like on the surface, because it's completely different once you put it down underneath. And then you have, is it still intact? Is it spinning right down there again? Or is it like a crawler harness where did I miss a nibble on it? You know, I didn't see the diver went but didn't take out any line, or a board rod that you couldn't really see and they just swiped at it, which if you watch any kind of video with a camera on a lure, you see they come in and just swipe at it a lot. Well, did they grab the tail and now it's ripped up and it looks funny? I don't know, because now I got to reel in my 300 copper and find out. There's just so much about it that even if it was exactly what you thought it was in terms of using reel, like a real bait, there's those other factors that you just can't really account for, where, you know, you might be trolling around and you don't know it, but that lure is basically trash, like a crawler harness that got nipped up and the worm is gone, or maybe it hasn't been eaten in 2.5 hours and now it's starting to get mushy and fall apart, and it's not getting the right whip, or, you know, there's just too many other things about it that I don't like. I'm not saying it doesn't work. What I'm saying is that it's not better than all of the other normal applications that we would normally use. I can do anything I want with a vegan rig the same way I can with a meat rig, and I don't have to worry about all that other shenanigans. So point being is that when meat is working, and it can catch fish on any given day, I'm not saying it only catches fish 10% of the days. I'm saying that was when it's the best rod on the boat. What I'm saying is that when it is the best, I think it's for another reason. It's not because you're using a real bait. I think it's because it's the longest leader out there, and they're lazy, or you're fishing deep down in the cold water where they're not actively eating and they don't have to chase it as much. They're just, instead of going like this, it's going. Maybe it's the teasers. There might be something with the teasers where it's like, wow, this one's way back here and it's fourth in line, and you know, maybe they think it's easy that way. I don't know. It's either leader length, teasers, something else, but I firmly believe it's not because it's a real piece of meat. And yes, I know meat catches big fish, but it does so because of the presentation. It's scientifically proven that the biggest fish live deeper in the column than, you know, medium fish or small fish. It's progressive as it goes down. So, you know, more times than not, you know, big meat guys are running it deeper. It's colder down there, obviously. So you also have deep, cold water with a long leader, you know, 5 feet-ish, let's say, on average with, you know, meat rigs. Some people are 4, some people are 6. So you have a long leader in cold water down deep where big fish are living, and you have a meathead that's going like this, real slow. That's just the perfect recipe for it. So it's not because it's real, it's because of the product, of the presentation, about how it's fished. That's what I really wanted to get at here. Like I said, I'm no meat expert. I could definitely be better at it. But I just wanted to make some points that I haven't heard anybody else make. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just something for you to think about. Now that I've put myself on this island of everybody probably thinking that I'm crazy, I will leave it at that, and I'll see you on the next one.